Here, Chris, this is your first meeting, so congratulations and condolences. Well, welcome to your new role at City of Ann Arbor. We appreciate your efforts this evening. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. The goal is to be done by 9 o'clock or earlier tonight. And we'll go ahead and do a roll call. Chris, we do need your help with the roll call. And so we all have to acknowledge our name and municipality that we're located in. Can you help us run through the roll?
Yes, not a problem. I'm starting with Commissioner Zemke.
Adam Zemke here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Ralph.
Alice Ralph here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Cornell.
I'm Jen Cornell and here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Luzundia.
She is no longer on the commission.
Yeah.
She's actually officially off now.
She is
Okay.
out. Yep.
My apologies. Commissioner Wilhelm.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Aber. I believe.
Haber.
That me, Haber?
That's
Haber.
you.
Haber, yes, I'm here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Henny. Okay. Commissioner Borgsdorf.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, Borgsdorf, I'm present in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Yep, here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Okay. And with that, I believe we're in the quorum.
Did
Excellent.
you,
Oh,
did you call Briggs?
Oh, I apologize, Commissioner Briggs.
Yep, here in Ann Arbor.
Here we go.
do we have anybody else? Did we miss Alice? Did we get you?
Yes, we did.
Okay, excellent. All right.
And
So what-
Milton is not here, isn't he actually a member of this group?
Yes, you could call his name. He is absent.
Okay. Commissioner Milton is absent.
So
And
that's
Lisa-
Dahoney. His
and
name is
Lisa-
Dahoney.
Milton Dahoney. Is
Hmm.
Lisa part of this group, Lisa Dish?
She is not.
No, she's not.
Jen,
No, I've
with
replaced her as the other council liaison.
Welcome back.
Well, we'll go ahead and go into the approval of the agenda. We do have an agenda that Chris posted and did some updates to. You can see that on Legistar. Any questions regarding tonight's agenda?
Yes. I think generally we have had an item on the agenda called members' time. That seemed to disappear. How come? And
We
I
actually-
would like also that, pardon me?
I was going to answer your question, but
Oh, okay.
go ahead and I can answer both at once.
Okay, then we had correspondence, particularly from Dan Rubenstein. It was very interesting, and it seems that we should have a way to acknowledge and undertake the response to correspondence. So correspondence comes, it seems like that should be an item on the agenda. And I want to have a moment in the time in number 7 about the current activities for Earth Day.
So, Alan, just for your reference, in terms of the member time, we did restructure the agenda, I think around December of last year. And in that restructuring, Alice and I indicated that our goal was to try and reduce the amount of time individually for these meetings. And so we focused on the work groups, eliminated the member time, and streamlined the agenda. And so that member time piece has been out of there for a little while. You are certainly, and I think you have indicated a couple of attachments for the work stream updates. And so you're welcome to comment on that, but we've not had that member time for a little bit here. Regarding the public communication, you can see certainly in the agenda, Dan's comments have been included. They are under the public comment, written communications. We've had written communications from other members of the public as well. And, I think it's important that we keep those consistent, that regardless of who writes in, they end up in the written comments and are attached. And Chris did a nice job incorporating that in tonight. So those are, Dan's comments are written in, and you can take a look at them, obviously. But I don't know that we want to give them any more public comment other than other members of the public. I think it's important that we keep consistent there.
Well, no, it seems that there were some good ideas in there that we should address.
I
Certainly.
imagine they will be.
Exactly. Thanks, Alice. All right. Any other questions on tonight's agenda? Okay. Could we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the agenda as presented.
All right, Alice, thank you. And seconded by Rita. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Agenda as presented, approval of the minutes from the last meeting, March 2023. Those are attached. Thank you for doing that, Chris. Any questions at all about March's meeting minutes, rather, sorry.
I reviewed them. They look fine to me. I would move their approval. I don't know if there's other discussion about it.
Thanks, Steve.
Well, I would add the comment we have in there, the report from the activation committee that is simply received, but has not been discussed or approved. So it is in there, but we still have not recognized in what state it is in there, but maybe we will do tonight.
Yeah, we did.
I'd like to second Steve's motion to approve, since that's what starts our discussion, if any.
Oh, sorry.
For sure, support. Alan, just so you know, the meeting, that document is attached. We didn't take action on it yet. We're working on working with the Parks Department in a collaborative approach. But I think we had very good discussion last time, and I don't think we called for action on it at the particular time, in part because it was distributed very shortly before the meeting. And it's a pretty hefty document. So I agree that we had a very robust discussion, but I don't think we intended to take action on it, and the meeting minutes reflect that. All right, so we have a motion on the floor and a second. All in favor of approving the meeting minutes from last time, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Excellent, motion carries. So we're going to go ahead and move into the next agenda item, which is public comment. Chris, do we have members of the public who've raised their hands asking to speak?
Yes, we do.
All right.
Okay.
Do you want to advance them in?
Yes. Before I start, all public speakers will be given 3 minutes to speak, and I'll give you a 30 seconds head start before your time is up.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, now I'm promoting the number ending in 326. You may now speak.
Hello, this is Jeff Crockett. Can you all hear me?
We can, Jeff.
Yes, we
Thank
can.
you.
Great. Well, I'm just very pumped up and excited. I think that the job that was done by you, Adam, and Rita, along with others, the draft scope for RFP, the Center of the City design and design process, was exceedingly well done, thorough, based on experience from other communities, looked at the past, the present, and the future. I'm particularly excited about, the activation suggestions. And I understand that it's simply a template that's going to be handed over to the Parks Department, and those who have other comments to make will certainly have a number of opportunities to do that. I do want to report that we've got some exciting developments. We have basically are near toward the installation of murals on near the community gardens. We have been working the library green Conservancy's been working with Derek Delacourt to come up with a contract that will happen soon. We have working on a contract with the artist, Treetown Murals, Mary Tiefels. It's going to be beautiful, and it's going to change the perception of how that space is going to be viewed. I am just hoping that after this installation, that sometime in a future meeting, there'll be serious consideration to at least removing the parking from that one area next to the gardens and the murals, and consideration of putting in seating, which we think is the only true way to sort of provide short-term activation. I do want to thank, though, there are numerous people that I think need to be thanked. And I'm hoping at some point Jen and Erica will take some time to list the people at a city council meeting. I mean, not just Adam and Rita, but we have Frank Wilhelm, Alice Rolfe, Odile Haber's been working, and Alan have been spending a ton of time planning for the April 22nd Earth Day event. Megan Sims has been involved. She's got Earth Radio, a fantastic future soul band out of Grand Rapids who will just knock your socks off. We have Ralph McKee, a blues band will be there. But we've also had input from people around the country. I mean, there's Amy Rowe from North Carolina who's donating all her time to basically, I'll just wrap up. What I'm hoping, there are a lot of people to thank. I'm just hoping that these people will get proper recognition sometime soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff. Any other?
Yeah, is my time up, I assume?
It is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Chris, any other members of the public?
Just
Okay. Yes.
sorry.
The next one.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Jeff Henney is in the panelist area right now. He needs to be promoted to the commission. Heads up.
I'm sorry. I'm not seeing his name on my screen.
Jeffrey Henney. He
Okay.
is.
Okay. Yes.
There you go.
There you go.
Excellent. All right. Thank you for doing that, Chris.
Yeah, sorry for being late. I got derailed with family stuff.
That's
No,
okay. Jeff,
no.
Jeff, you want to just real quick before we continue with members of the public, probably would be a good idea, Jeff, if you could just indicate where you're calling in from.
Ann Arbor, Jeff Henney, Ann Arbor.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Well,
Oh.
let's keep
All
going.
right. Now, the next public speaker will now be Robert Black. You are allowed to speak.
Can you hear me, Chris?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Thank you. Welcome, Chris. Welcome aboard. This is a great group. I'm glad you're here. And congratulations, Jen, for your move to the Art Association. That's powerful and beautiful. We need more art in the world anyway. I'm happy to see you guys again after all these meetings. I've been with you. And I want to echo Jeff's comment about the RFP progress. It's fantastic. It's very thorough, and Adam led the job very well. The inputs from others, Rita's input and collating different parts of it, and all of that have made it a very powerful document. And so I encourage you to continue that and build the alliances with it that you need with Parks and City Council. Also, being a colleague with Jeff Crockett on the initiating committee has been a real joy for me, in working alongside Amy Rowe in North Carolina on graphics and other things. We've been contributing a lot from the initiating committee to this group and the efforts here, largely to work on activation events and that kind of thing. So my thought to you is to encourage you to look at the role of the initiating committee as some kind of an entity that will serve the Council of Commons, and that you acknowledge that and use it to your advantage, either to absorb it into the group in some way as a subcommittee, not unlike the Green Team, and that you also find its relationship not only with the Council of the Commons, but with Library Green Conservancy. To the extent you can put this together as an aligned group, as I've spoken with at every meeting, you will be much more effective at raising money and building the coalition of public support that you need. The other things that are really important and powerful is the activating events. And the park, the library Liberty Plaza project has been really powerful with Jessica Black involved, but we could connect more to that. The next big event is Earth Day on April 22nd. There's an event at Leslie Science Center on the 23rd, but this one that's coming up, as Mr. Crockett mentioned, is really powerful and a chance to really engage the community on many levels for Earth Day. So I'd encourage you to look at that and how you could support that and have it literally become a part of this group and not just done only by the activating committee.
30 seconds.
Same thing with the murals. I've talked to Mary Tiefels a couple years ago on this too, and her image will be something that will be really powerful as a community outreach. So I'd encourage you again to try to participate with that and make it part of an integrated coalition of support from these three entities, Library Green, Initiating Committee, and Council of the Commons. I wish you good luck tonight and have a powerful meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. All right. Chris, any more public speakers this evening?
Yes, we have Daniel Adams.
Okay.
Okay, Daniel, I will now promote you. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Good evening. Daniel Adams, 1016 Daniel Street. I called in tonight because I was informed that during the meeting tonight there would be a fulsome response to my email from earlier this year pointing out, among other things, the startling fact that the city's putative partner in this so-called public-private partnership had committed only a tiny fraction of its resources to the issuance of the badly overdue RFP. I think it's telling, and that's putting it mildly, that Library Green has failed to commit the full strength of its resources to the success of the very project that was created to effectuate and to complete before the city's bicentennial. That, of course, was true until I emailed the council pointing out this inconvenient fact. And I think it's telling that Mr. Haber tonight would rather discuss public comments other than mine rather than address the merits of some of the troubling facts that I pointed out in that communication. And I'm hoping that the council tonight, and particularly the members of Library Green who are responsible for the financial condition of that entity, again, the city's putative partner in this project, will speak to that organization's financial situation, why the organization failed to commit its resources to the project earlier than it did, which, by the way, has cost the project unknown number of months of time and delay. To the extent that Library Green could have committed that money earlier than it did, earlier than this year, that's just more time that's been wasted. We are now a year away from the bicentennial. We are now many years away from the passage of Proposal A. And at this point, the reluctance of that organization to come forward with both resources, money, and also be transparent in how it's raised money to date, how it plans to raise much more money in the future than $70,000. We're talking many millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, perhaps. We don't know because we still don't have designs. I'm hoping that these issues will be addressed tonight. That's all I have to say for now. Thank you very much.
Thanks for calling in, Dan.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public?
No.
Okay,
No.
very good. We'll go ahead and close public comment then. We don't have any guest speakers tonight. We are going to move into the working groups. We have 2 working groups, as everyone knows. One is on future space design, which covers the RFP, fundraising, and planning. We have 3 agenda items that fall into that category. Actually, I guess there's, Chris, I think we may have had a agenda issue here, but one of the items is related to, and you saw this pop up about a week ago on the agenda. This is related to the working group recommendation around the RFP. That's one item. And then Councilmember Haber also sent out, and we included in the agenda today, a couple of items for discussion that Councilmember Haber can bring about. So, and those are related to the CPA Parks Infrastructure case study, and also an item related to some ideas. So if it's okay with folks, we will go ahead and look at the RFP scope proposal. That's an item that the working group has been working on for quite some time. And Chris, are you able to pull that up for us just so it's easy rather than one of us try to do it? If not, I can always do it.
I'd like to say, Adam, that other information about parks and reimagining the commons was only for information. Very interesting websites. I hope people would look at it at their leisure. It wasn't particularly for conversation right now because we got enough to do. So that was just forwarding for information. Maybe there should be a way to designate what's for information and what's for conversation.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Alan. Alice, did you have your hand up for those items or for something else?
I think I did, but I got lost in the interruption.
Okay. Chris, did you want to pull up the RFP scope work, or I can always do it as well?
Can you just give me 1 second? If you can pull it up.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's fine. I can pull it up here.
Thank you.
Very good. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. So this is we had a working group. We've had a working group on this subject for quite some time, and the members of the working group, per a lot of the discussions we've had, have included, in this particular case, myself and Alice, Alan, Frank, Rita, and then we've also included, as we did with the activation, we've pulled in folks from the outside as well. Those individuals did include Robert Black, and they also included Jeff Crockett. They were willing and eager volunteers to participate in this process. And we took a couple of documents that Heather Saferth put forward and gave us previously. One was the city's standard RFP template. And there are a lot of elements of that RFP template that are form-based, and they're really not intended for alteration. We stayed away from all of those, but we did focus in on an element that is entitled the scope. This is something that many folks worked on as part of an RFI process. And so we revisited that RFI process and worked on creating a scope. And so we went through a process by which, and I'll outline this, and certainly any of the other working group members should feel free to comment on how we went through this and the process, and feel free to raise your hands as well. So, what we did was we started off by pulling up the two documents. We looked at the old RFI. We looked at all the inputs that Center of the City, Council of the Commons members provided. We looked at the RFP template, and then we asked a series of questions around what was missing, a little more, to try and gain some organic feedback. And after that, we asked every member to submit their own organic response, what they would write if given a blank template for the scope. We asked everyone to stay out of the standardized portions of the RFP, because that is intended to be written by city staff. And per our previous discussions with the Parks Department, that is what their intent is, and we want to honor those discussions. But in the areas that are customizable and scope focused, there is an agreement that those would have some input. And so, that is the area that we focused on. We asked for this sort of organic approach. And then Rita did really an amazing job with trying to identify areas of consistency and areas where there were gaps, and created a spreadsheet that really tried to build those out. And I took that spreadsheet and tried to consolidate based on the version that I had put forth. And so, and I really tried to look at areas of difference and areas of similarity, and wherever possible, try and weave things together. We then got back together after we created a straw man document based on that, and went through and amended that straw man document as a whole. And there were some changes that were made. There were not a large amount of changes, but also not a small number of changes either. And I think that the easiest way to describe this, and certainly Frank, Alice, or Rita describe, if you think I'm misrepresenting this, please chime in. But we really sort of took a majority vote look at each of the areas of the changes, and decided on if we were on or if we were off, what we delete, what we add, etc. And sort of took an up or down majority rules approach. Following that, I rewrote the draft that you see before you and sent it back out to that working group, and asked that folks take a final look at it and decide if they're going to support, if this is a majority opinion of the working group, or if not. We did receive a number of affirmative votes, way more than a majority in favor, and then advanced it to this group to take a look at here. I don't know, Frank, Rita, Alice, Ellen, if you would like to comment, please feel free. Ellen, you do have your hand up. If there are others, please feel free. And then we'll go ahead and run through it. Just on the process, please, at this point in time. Then we'll get into the substance in a minute.
Yes, well, on the process, I'm not so enthusiastic about this process, because the effect was, by call it majority rule or whatever, a great deal of the content of what has been in this endeavor since its beginning has been line by line, word by word, canceled out. And I do have, as I think people know, some amendments to make sure that that is an intentional cancellation or simply an omission, that the commons as a concept can be reintroduced into this document because it has essentially been removed. And why that is, why the Civic Center building was crossed out, even though in our last consultation it was back in, and why the center of the city commons was removed, even though at the beginning of our conversation I thought that was back in. So I don't feel that the process really reflected our own conversations, or that in summation that it adequately reflects the vision of what is possible there, and is far too limited. And so I have amendments to alter that when the time comes to actually look at this line by line, beginning with line 2.
Okay, thanks, Helen. Councilmember Briggs. Okay. All right, well, let's go ahead and take a look at this then. And Ellen, if you could take your hand down just so we've got it down.
Oh.
Sorry, I was thinking I was talking, but I just unraised my hand. Can I make a quick?
Yeah, please feel free. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much for explaining that process. I guess one piece that I was surprised about, it sounds like this was kind of done by the working committee of the Council of the Commons. Can you discuss what input city staff and park staff has had into this document at this point?
None yet, other than we started with the RFI that Heather had really consolidated. So the goal of tonight's discussion, really what we wanted to do in the working group, was to advance this to this body and do a check-in before we have a discussion with city park staff. We're working on getting one of those set up. We've been trading emails around some dates, but have not solidified that yet, at least one that worked with schedules. Okay. So tonight we sort of wanted to advance this and get some feedback from this body before we went and talked with park staff. It's by no means done, but we didn't want to simply go there before checking in here.
I guess that's good to know. I mean, I would say this is very atypical in terms of how an RFP might be developed in the city. Don't know how close this, having not had staff feedback into this process or the content here. I mean, not that I haven't, overall, I think it looks great. I'm impressed with what everybody's put together, but I guess my point is just that we shouldn't get too I would really want to see what their input is on putting out the RFP. I would think that the Parks Department would have quite a few comments on this.
Yeah, I totally don't disagree at all, Councilmember Briggs. And I think our thought was we didn't want to get too far down the road, given that we don't have the really, as a working group, we don't really have the authority over the Council of the Commons, and so we wanted to advance something to this group for discussion, make sure there was at least an idea that this was the right direction before we went to the park staff. We agree that park staff is probably going to have pretty substantial input, and we have. I think we've had pretty good discussions, pretty constructive discussions with them around that process. So I don't disagree with you at all. We just didn't want to get ahead of this group. Alice, you have your hand up.
Yes. I want to, I believe that the work we did in the working group, which is the appropriate place to just kind of hash things out, was as a result of that first presentation that Adam made to the Parks Advisory Committee, Council or Committee. And it was sort of informally agreed that we could kind of take a stab at it, and then that would help advance the parks engagement with the RFP and the request for and the scope of the work. That would give them some information from us, and while they were working on other projects that couldn't be put aside just for this. So the timing was an important issue too, so that we could give them a jump start on what we were thinking about, and that they could look to as an input for what they will do.
Thank you, Alice. Any other thoughts or comments, questions on the process? We'll go ahead and just start by going through the document then, if that's okay. And I don't want to ask for a formal vote on this tonight. I really just want to get a feel for where folks are thinking, have a little more inclusive discussion, see if there are things that folks find glaring or off. And then we do want to take it to the city staff because that really is the step that is going to integrate it into the formal process. And so, Alan, I'm going to grant you just a little bit of leeway here if you want to have another comment around the process before we get into the discussion around the document. If it's around the document, I'd like you to just hold off.
Hey, you said we were going to the document, so when we get there, call on me.
All right, very good. So I'm going to go ahead and try and take this section by section. So that we have some chunks to bite off here. This first item, like I said, we started with the RFI document that was created by this body back in 2022, and there was a lot of really good work by Heather Seifert at the time to try and write this and put it forward in a way that the city staff would normally issue a request for proposal or information from.
Adam, could I just mention so that everybody understands that this is attached to our agenda, so anybody can see it and get to it if they need to look at it more closely.
It is, yes, it's on the agenda. I pulled this document up from that agenda, in fact. So this first area, is really just a request, outlines the areas, the geographic areas of the city that are in question here. It does include a link to a Google-based map, and we really tried to be very clear around what it was, what we were looking for. There is some standard language that Heather had incorporated in regarding the RFP and the lack of guarantee for any award or contract. There was a background here, and the background originally with the RFI was shifted a little bit differently. We had some thoughts that were incorporated into this regarding both some language around how this particular site, the center of the city, came to be with regard to Proposal A and the city charter amendment, and really the land that is bound as part of that city charter amendment between Fifth Avenue, William Division, and Liberty Streets, including the publicly owned spots of Liberty Plaza, the surface of Library Lane, and Library Lane parking structure and Library Lane itself, as well as the areas of Kemp House. And so this is all part of the center of the city. And we really tried to identify that. That was a lot of carryover from the RFI. We did incorporate a couple of historical elements that go beyond this, which we thought were important, related to downtown commons, and sort of the history behind why or what Ann Arbor had historically around a downtown commons, both in front of the original courthouse on the corner of Huron and Main Street, but the second Washtenaw County Courthouse is really the one that most folks reference. And then also the jailhouse square, which is in front of the current downtown post office bordered by 4th and Liberty and 5th. And so, we really referenced there's some elements around a downtown commons that were important historically in the city. We then went and sort of brought back into this idea around the future of the particular site we're dealing with, focused more in on that element, passage of the resolution by City Council to establish the Center of the City Task Force in 2019, and the charge, including some links, and also the appendices of that Center of the City report. There's a lot of really great information in there, as I know many of us have really gotten into. And so we wanted to call that out as a point of reference for any prospective vendors. We then highlighted the fact that the City Council, one of the recommendations of the Center of the City Task Force was to create our body here, the Council of Commons, and highlighted that aspect for reference. So with that, we went into a section that we entitled Community Values. And this was really an intent to show that there is a long historical support around neighborhood parks in Ann Arbor. Always does very well when presented to the voters, but an emerging concern around taxation requests, which I think is an accurate reflection of what we have seen, both related to this site and related to spending in this site, and also related to spending around park areas around the city, in the neighborhoods, et cetera. And so we wanted to reference that. We also wanted to reference the fact that we had spent considerable time looking at other communities, different governance models, et cetera, that have informed our thinking and our thought process, and sort of indicate to prospective vendors that this may be not in the same traditional governance sense that Ann Arbor has utilized for neighborhood parks. Provide some context there. We went into a third section that we looked at the site details, included a picture from Google Maps there and a link, same link as before, to the area that we're talking about here, bounded by Liberty, 4th, William, and Division Streets, including the sites in particular. Heather had done a really nice job in this area, including in some of the elements related to protected bike lanes, et cetera, and also including even the parcel numbers. So we've got the parcel numbers factored in here, and there is a clickable link to a map of Liberty Plaza. This is really for activation purposes, but probably is helpful to a vendor. So we included that as well. There's also an element around Kempfhaus, which is obviously part of the center of the city, but also a very unique parcel from a historical perspective, from a use perspective. And so we incorporated some distinct elements that were related to that. We basically overall in that first and second section intended to be very clear with any particular vendors as to what it is that we were looking to explain to them around the site. The third section is focused on what we're asking of them. And so, we specifically asked for a final design and design process that is transformative, adaptable, and inclusive, one that physically bridges the gap between today's configuration of multi-parcel spots. Obviously, we've talked about that throughout the first and second section of the documents, but also metaphorically bridges the gap between the history and what could be, trying to look to the future, especially as we do approach the bicentennial. We really tried to indicate that we are not wedded to a particular fixed use and or feature, and that there is a lot of adaptability that was really important to us. Those were things that came about, in a lot of that research that Rita spearheaded around comparable communities and activation, and that we really favor that this space needs to be inclusive to all members of the community. That you shouldn't have to buy a coffee in order to go sit outside in downtown Ann Arbor. That there should be an opportunity to, for anyone of any income to participate and enjoy open space. We were deliberate in our words in the second paragraph and second section related to thinking outside of the standard quote unquote box as a way to engage the community. We used could and should in underlined and deliberate fashions to indicate differences. And in this first area at the bottom of page 3, we indicate considerations that could, meaning they don't have to, but were high points as to potential considerations: multimodal transportation, adaptable spaces, relaxing green space, water features, active play areas, permanent, semi-permanent shading, electrical connectivity, reconfigurable seating and tables, potential public restrooms, displays of public art, and is seen as a natural gathering community space, supports economic and environmental sustainability, etc. Those are the coulds. We were deliberate in that term in particular because we did not want to limit any designers from thinking outside the box. And there was also a lot of enthusiasm to guide the conversation as well. So we then indicated that there are certain things that should be delivered as part of this process. One is cost estimates around the proposed design and design process elements. That was important to us. Obviously, we have to have a product to guide this work, so we need to understand what the cost is going to be there. Engineering considerations around existing structural elements, including a necessary assessing of pre-existing problems. Don't anticipate that to be the case because one would assume that the parking structure that is under the library service lot and the areas around Liberty Plaza in particular are in good shape. They appear to be, but we don't have any idea, so we wanted to address that. Methods to use publicly owned spaces to enhance the vibrancy of the entire block, including any necessary easements. That really speaks to the fact that these parcels are not really aligned with one another yet. And so we need to figure out, a design firm, design proposal needs to indicate how we're going to create easements, how that could work in partnership with other block partners. We also spoke to, and this was then a continued conversation with this group, the identification of public and private funds to be braided and blended to support the construction ongoing maintenance costs. It's an important thing, obviously. We indicated a reference to the governance and active planning draft document that we brought up at the last Council of the Commons meeting. And then certainly the ability for the site to be accessible all year round, ADA accessible in particular, to speak to our inclusive approach. And this last item is a carryover from the RFI related to the bicentennial as being a focus for this project. We were very deliberate in our language regarding community engagement because it was really important to everyone here, and I think this is carried through from the RFI as well, that this process be very open in the community and that it not be limited to only those who are really taking the opportunity to participate. We really want to reach out into the community and gather input from individuals who may not necessarily be regularly participating in the local political process. And so we were very intentional with our language that highlights this in both paragraph 1 and the bullet points around paragraph 2. We did then get into, in this last paragraph and section here on bottom of page 4, a number of organizations and groups that were active in the space, giving the designer or designers some ideas of organizations to look to in addition to the community. And so we wanted to both incorporate and be deliberate in our intent with indicating that community members who are not as engaged should be part of the process. We expect that any respondent will have a plan to incorporate those members, but also we wanted to indicate that there are a number of organizations and groups, boards, et cetera, anywhere from nonprofit and government-based boards through organizations that represent different constituencies, including faith-based groups, advocates for those experiencing homelessness, advocates for persons with disabilities, youth-based groups, et cetera, that should be part of this as well. So we wanted to give some direction around at least some ideas for designers to look at. Other than that, this language here in section 4 and 5 are standard city language, didn't really alter anything there. And that is sort of the end of the document here in terms of where we landed. I don't know, Frank, Rita, Alice, Alan, if you'd like to add anything in terms of, Alan, before you offer your amendment, I know you want to offer your amendments here. I'd like to just focus first on the existing document and see if any of you would like to comment on the elements where we arrived, process, et cetera. Rita, I see your hand up, so go ahead.
Thanks for that review. I agree with how you presented it. And I would say what is missing now is the context of how it fits into the rest of the RFP, so which would involve, I have forgotten those details now, but it's the kind of thing where it calls out to consultants to respond to these elements that we've outlined. And so I think that's the thing that is, for myself, is helpful in centering this particular document, to know that there's more out there that has to be coordinated in order to move this to a next phase.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a really important discussion. I know there is probably a standard operating window for that with the city. I think that's the message we got from Heather previously, and I know that's but you should bring that up during our discussion with the park staff as well, with Josh and Derek. So I think that's a good question to reference. Frank?
Yeah, I just want to, I guess, echo what you presented is what the working group felt strongly about, and I even going through it now, I'm picking up some emphasis points that I either didn't catch or forgot, but it was a good review of the collective effort that we put into this document.
Thanks, Frank. All right, Alan, would you like to add anything in before? I know you do want to offer your amendment. I want to give you time to do that. And Would you like to say anything more about the document as proposed before you offer any amendment?
Well, yes, I'm when this campaign began for the Ann Arbor Community Commons, it derived from, I'm a historian, from beginning to read the history of the Commons, initially by Peter Linebaugh, called the Magna Carta Manifesto that was published in 2008, that demonstrated that many of the conflicts in society were about the privatization of what were public goods, public resources, and that was a continuing struggle. And it helped me begin to see many of the things I was involved with in my political life now of many decades around the commons. And then I read other things and saw that all over the world, people are experimenting with a shift in the way community resources are organized to be self-managed. And that the Nobel Prize was won by a sociologist from Indiana demonstrating that when commonly pooled resources are self-managed by the people who use them, rather than either by the government or by a private corporation, they are better managed, more productively, happily for the people. And that was demonstrated in the study of thousands of commons all over the world, and it won the Nobel Prize. So in some way, and I met this woman, Eleanor Ostrom, and in some way I felt that we really in Ann Arbor as an innovative town should begin to see our public space, particularly the center of the city, and how we got focused on that is another question, as a commons, as a gathering of public resources that are managed by the people who use them. And that was what was presented in 2009 when I first spoke at the city council on this question, with the adjunct that the greatest question we face now is how to develop a culture of peace and nonviolence for the next generations. And that whenever there is public land or a decision to be made, that question of how this contributes to the creation of a culture of peace and nonviolence is part of the picture. That's what I began with in 2009, and I have been fairly persistent and felt that the commons as a form of organization, not just as a neutral word, is very important. And I feel that, and one of the recommendations out of the task force was people need to self-educate about what this commons is, that it's not just a blank space. It's a space that has a culture and a character reflected in their mutual benefit, mutual responsibility, mutual respect, and so on. So I've gone through all that. So what I found was in reading this document that sense of the commons as a way of people relating and developing community was almost completely cut out. And the amendments I want to propose reinsert that idea, not to make it a fixed idea because it is something that we have to create, but a part of the exploration of how we develop the center of the city as a heart place of the city that is really unpaving the parking lot to put up Paradise, the Kona White Light, all the ideas of creativity and essentially in the city that we can have. So that all my recommendations or amendments that I will say again are from that perspective, that the commons is important, education about the commons is important, and public space of many functions, including indoor functions, are important. That's what the Civic Center was conceived of in the initial proposal A. And those things were unfortunately, for whatever reason, cut out. Now, if they're cut out in principle, that you would prefer that this space be run by the parks in the traditional way, then vote no against the commons. But I don't believe it. I believe that people gravitated to this because they sense it as a different way of organizing resources that better builds community. And so I would like to see us in the various ways we can reinsert the notion of the commons and the exploration of how it is done, the teaching that is necessary to learn, how we self-manage our own resources. So that's my preface. And
Alan, real quick here before you get too far into this, because I think you overstepped on the the technical definition of preface there a little bit.
I overstep, Adam, but give me a break.
Yeah, I will. I grant you some
Thank you.
latitude here. I do want to indicate, though, there was a discussion in this working group regarding a civic center building in particular, and the key
Yeah.
word being building. There was, I offered up the question because I think we need to have that discussion. And there was not necessarily interest or there was a concern about making that as a called out element to its potential cost. There was no resistance to the idea of around civic center purposes or anything like that. So I don't want you to represent
I have preferable wording that maybe you'll be happier with when we come to that part in the going through the text.
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and take a look at your language as well? I'm happy to pull it up. I am just going to indicate before we get into Alan some of the ideas you're offering. I'm actually not asking that we take a formal vote on this tonight. What I'm asking for is that we get a general idea of consensus, that we feel okay about talking with the park staff in this direction. I think that's the key thing from a tactical perspective that we need to do. I didn't want to advance this document to the park staff before we had some eyes on it from this group. I didn't think that was right. So that's really the goal for tonight, in my opinion, unless there is any opposition to that process.
Well, that's fine with me.
Okay. All right. So real quick, Alan, before you get into ideas that you'd like to offer to be included, I'd like to see if there are any other questions from members of the council who are not members of the working group. Any questions on process? Sarah, you're up first, then Councilmember Briggs.
Thanks. This is a lot of work, so thank you guys for doing this. I guess my question is, if we have very minor feedback, how do you want that? Do you want me to say it now? Do you want me to
Depends on how minor it is.
I think it's pretty minor. Like, for example, like I clicked on that includes link, and maybe something's wrong with, but it just brought up like a map. It didn't bring up anything. It just brought up like a Google map. And I think it would be helpful to show a map that actually calls out these 3 or 4 spaces. Okay. I think somebody like Jeff, I think maybe made one at one time. I feel like we have this map that shows like, this is Liberty Plaza, this is Library Lane, this is the library lot, this is Kempf House, like on the map, because there's so many different properties. Like, I just think that would be like sort of a helpful, like, okay, these are the spaces, and you can see like how they're, I have like 2 more things that are like that. Do you want me to just
keep going? I think this is good. We're recording this, so we're going to reference it and we can make adjustments. So thank you.
This is super minor, but you talk about the Denali lofts in like the thing with, and it's lofts, not loft. And I noticed further down, this is so picky, I'm so sorry, but you said further down, it's like a condo building. And I think like, since that's the first mention, I'm just trying to think of somebody who like is not super familiar with this city, like I wish I knew what page it was on. No, it's up. It's further up. It's like, there's a section where you talk about like the different things that are on the block. Keep going. Right, the block. Yeah, so the block includes blah, blah, blah. Like if it was like Denali Lofts condo complex or something like that, just because people might be like, what is that? See, very minor. And then somehow I think we need to make reference to the fact that we're about to start a comprehensive planning process, because particularly when I think about the community engagement aspect of this, I worry, as always, about people being over-engaged and having that sort of fatigue. So if there's any way to link up, like the comp plan is going to be going on for a while. It's hopefully starting soon, but hasn't started yet. So like I think there should it would be great if there was some sort of synergy between the 2 teams. So, I mean, even just highlighting that we're starting that, like, I think we can, at some point, we'll be able to name the consultants. We should take advantage of that process.
What is this planning process? You referring to something I don't understand? I'm sorry.
The city's doing a comprehensive, a whole like city, it's called it used to be called a master plan. Now we're calling it a comprehensive plan. We're finally doing that whole update for the entire city. So that includes, it's like the land use portion of it mostly, but it's citywide. So there will be like a massive engagement talking about zoning and land uses and city values and stuff like that, which brings me to my final thing. I think it would be helpful to also sort of explain, like these aren't like the library lot is not zoned a park. It's zoned, I think, public land. And so, there is sort of this tension of like part of these spaces that compose the commons are parks and part are not. And I think that that's something that this, whoever applies for this needs to consider, and then whoever wins this needs to sort of like suss out like how do we sort of like reconcile those things, because there are different funding strategies potentially. So
yeah,
that's it.
I think those are really good ideas. Thank you for that feedback.
Thank you for all of your work on this.
No, this is good. Like, this is why we wanted to bring it forth here. Councilmember Briggs, and then Mr. Borgsdorf.
Yeah. Thank you. I just want to offer some just real general thoughts, and I can send specific language later if there's interest. I thought that it might be there's a few different sections. One is the community value section, which I think is there's some language in that's I think fairly factual, and then the second paragraph just moves into a little less factual based language. And so I would suggest I can send some recommended language later, just maybe shifting that a little bit to talk more about how conservancies work and kind of that model, because that's been a lot of work that the commission has worked on previously in terms of comparative communities. So I can send some language along that the committee could take a look at, and might be able to be integrated before it goes to staff. Another component is in the section, I'm kind of bouncing around here, but there's a section under request I guess that's at the very top. Yes, sorry, the first section. So discussion about a tiered cost estimate, which I think makes a lot of sense. One thing to discuss with staff might be just the benefit of identifying how much funding we've actually have for this project right now, so that there's a way for those who are responding to provide a threshold of, provide us something within that cost estimate. I worry a little bit, obviously, the public engagement portion of this is where things get the most expensive, and we have a very long list there. So that's what could really increase the cost of this process. So I think just identifying what our funding is important. And then further down, I really liked how this is separated into kind of the could and the should be sections. I thought that was a really nice way to handle it. I thought something that in terms of the should language, just a little more clarity around the idea that this could be, I think this is alluded to, but just phased implementation, because we may have funding coming, if we get through this process, we may have funding that becomes available for different parts of the site at different times. And so just, it would be nice to have a final design that is cohesive, but also works well if different sections of the site get redeveloped at different times. And then this is the very small thing. Consistency in the capitalization of city was one thing that popped up.
I think we could take care of those. That sounds good.
And then I did have, just as I know Alan's going to be talking a little bit, I did have the opportunity to see kind of a list of things that you're interested in discussing, Alan. And I wonder if we could have a very long discussion if we ended up going bullet point through bullet point about those recommendation potential amendments. And so I would hope that when we enter that part of the conversation, that we might be able to group them together in terms of a sense of whether or not we really want to do a that level of amendments into this document right now.
Eric, I don't want to cut you off. Alan, I think what we'll do when we pull up your suggested changes is I'll pull them up and you can walk through them. And I think Erica is right. If we can try and group things together to see where everyone's head is at, I think that would probably be helpful. Is that okay?
Well, I'll be glad to, as you walk through the 6 pages, I'd be glad to walk through the 18 amendments. So you see in total what I am dealing with, and then you can maybe group, what aspects of this can be dealt with together. There is one regarding the notion of the commons that has several dimensions. There's one regarding community values, which is a little different but related. So I don't know. I'm glad to go through, and you can see what grouping you want.
Okay, we'll get to that in a minute then. So Alice, you've got your hand
so.
up.
I thought you had called on me. Point
Steve,
of order.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't see your hand still raised. The technology bumped you down. My apologies. Go ahead.
So can I indulge also in some prefatory remarks before I get to my comment?
Absolutely.
First of all, thank you. I think this is a good document, a good place to start the discussion. Obviously, we're having a good discussion. My other prefatory comment is that I look forward to the ideas around the words to kind of breathe life into some of those ideas that Alan was just describing. I think that's important to talk through and think about that. The comments I wanted to make were sort of from the view as the PAC liaison, and I think the language or the questions that I'm assuming that the colleagues will have is around Liberty Plaza and Kempf House, and the idea that like how to change the use to the extent that the use is intended to be changed of those parcels. With regard to Liberty, that's been a long discussion within the city, and just like the basic raw sort of governance structure, what is envisaged. And in the RFP, I don't know that it's not spelled out. I think we kind of point the way. There's a lot of homework that a responsible bidder will have to do to really understand the dynamics there and the use of that land. And then also with regard to Kempf House, because I mean, even PAC, we don't even mess with Kempf House. They're really operating their own operation there, and it being a historical site and so forth. So those, I think, some of the questions that the parks colleagues are likely to have will be in that direction as to sort of what are we expecting to receive back from like I say, a responsible bidder on this with regard to those topics.
I think that's fair, and I think we can also provide some sort of indicative descriptions, in particular related to Kempf House. Maybe we can talk offline about what some of that language might look like. But I totally hear you on that.
Super, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Alice, you're up next.
I have to kind of, it was when Sarah was speaking, some things really resonated in listening to everybody else. So I have to shift back. There was a mention of the fact that the center of the library lot is designated as public land. Well, so is Liberty Plaza, and so is Kempf House. Kempf House, and the library, and so forth. There's a lot of public land, and Sarah also mentioned the comprehensive plan that is coming in. That does emphasize land use. So all parks are public land. They are designated as parks as part of public land. that's a technicality, but it causes a lot of confusion as to who owns it and who doesn't, and who manages it. Parks has designated some public land properties that are managed by other than parks and managed by, if you will, a group of commoners. But I did want to point out that the ownership is public, and that makes us owners in an indirect way already. So I think that the ownership is a sort of a straw man, and I think we've covered a lot of the things that need to be covered in this RFP, since it's not a suggestion for a whole new society. It's a suggestion for a place where ideas and people are welcome. So that's what I wanted to say. Sarah will have to share a little bit of the responsibility for my having brought these technical things up. But
no, I appreciate that. You're right. It's all the same zoning. I think I more meant like, yeah, like it's parks, but then library lot's not under parks, and I think that's an important.
Exactly. Yeah. It makes it more complicated than it appears at first. So that's what I wanted to say at this point. And I also would like to say that, well, I'll save that for another time. And thanks.
Thanks. And I Alice, to your point, and Sarah, obviously to your comments earlier, like it does, like we can work on the language to indicate this comprehensive nature, but also clearly differentiate between the parks versus the City Office of Strategic Planning governance differences. I think that is, it's obviously something we have called out directly in the activation draft as well. We should probably be very clear about it here as well. So it's an excellent differentiation. Any other comments before I do want to give Alan his due here around his amendments, and we're going to try and walk through those. But any other comments regarding the existing document as written? Because this meeting is recorded, we have the ability to go back and make some changes. We're going to try and do that as best we can, and then go from there. Okay. All right, hearing none, then I'm going to go ahead, Alan, I'm going to pull up your document. Give me just 1 minute here to switch over to the, let's see here. Alan, I know you sent me this, so I'm going to take the liberty of actually putting it into something I can share on the screen here. Is that okay? That way you don't have to pull it up.
Yeah, that's what I hope, if it could go up there or next to the draft that we're working on. Yeah. I hope that this could just be distributed to everybody so they could see it as a whole, and then it'd be easier to reference. But however you can do it.
Okay, give me just 1 minute here. Okay. Okay, I think everyone can see.
Split the screen somehow so that we could see what it is that I'm.
Yeah, unfortunately, I cannot split the screen.
It might be simpler to keep. Well, I don't know. We can just start and see
how about we do this, Alan? So everyone can take a look in the agenda and see the document that was referenced, and so you can certainly pull that up. And I think it is a good idea for the public to be able to see your amendments here. So
I had hoped that we'd find an easy way to distribute those so they could have been easily seen ahead of time. But however, so could I begin?
Yes, please do, and try and group them in some elements that where they're aligned. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to. Just let me work through this the same you worked through the reference document. So the first essential that I feel should be altered is that this has always been called the center of the city commons by those who work with it. So that's what we should call it. In our last discussion, that's what it was agreed. And somehow that center of the commons part of the center of the city got dropped out in the last draft that was made. So I want us to call this the center of the city commons is what it is that we are dealing with as the name of the space. And so that's number one. And that appears in several places where we reference the center of the city. And I just want that to be referenced, the center of the city commons. This is the commons. And then the second addition, I'll just go through. We mentioned the first recommendation, which was for the Council of the Commons, was actually to begin that formation. It was not a final formation. And then the recommendation to begin planning. But I add another paragraph to reference the two other recommendations that are particularly important, that to convene meetings of all the partners on the block. And that was the second one, to remove the ground level parking. That should be clear that is the intention from the beginning. The city council, the task force and the city council adopted, and to integrate this into the long-term development as a priority in the city master plan. And Erica indicated that's now called the comprehensive plan, but whatever it is, this element, those three other recommendations should just be referenced. If somebody, a proposer, vendor, I guess they're getting called, should know those other recommendations, particularly around the notion of partners on the block. Because later on, I add on to name more specifically those partners. But
Ellen,
then very importantly, a third amendment is in the community values, which I felt was looking too negatively at the limitations of city financing. And I would have us add what I have said 100 times in this whole process. The resources available for the center of the city commons development are indeterminate. Ann Arbor is a rich city in Michigan and in America. In the advocacy of this project, the initiating view has been, make it beautiful and inviting, and the money will be there. This is a generous city, philanthropic, proud, and noticed in the larger world. Design something beautiful for the people, that it will feel like home from wherever you came, and the people will contribute. Money and many resources and talents will come from the bottom up and all around, as well as from the top down and far away. I think we need that paragraph because that is really the basis on which we're going to raise the $50 million or whatever it will eventually be that Dan Adams talks about. We don't have an access to. Well, we got to have that view of beauty as drawing the funds.
Let's keep going here.
Okay, okay. Then there's a references to of the site, and we talk about the Main Street district, the State Street district, but this is called the Midtown district, and we should emphasize that because in the initiating committee, at least, we are looking on how all the businesses around there can begin to see themselves as a Midtown district, of which the Commons is a reference and gathering point. So the Midtown district should be included in there.
Okay.
Then I added in, as I said, to identify who actually are the potential block partners. Jerusalem Gardens certainly should be mentioned. The First Martin Corporation, whether we mentioned Spark and the Continuing Education for Women program in the First Martin building, I don't know. I would attempt to, but anyhow, the music business is on the corner. That has always been a music place for years. The reading room, there's rental housing and apartments. The Intercooperative Council is an essential part of that as we're looking for cooperation, and the University of Michigan Credit Union. But in that mention of the block, We should also mention that the credit union, the Martin Corporation, and the library are all considering building changes. That should be in the mind of somebody who is seeing how to, engage this block. It's a block in transition. Okay, then we had in the other, we're on page 3 now, or what I had as page 3 is what are the expectations? And I would say that the top one, while I certainly appreciate intermodal community transportation, the top one is what the city itself said: safe, welcoming, and fosters a culture of peace and nonviolence. That's from the task force report that was approved by the city council. That really reflects the character of what we are trying to create in the center of the city. If I can proceed, then I have a quite incidental comment about, think outside the box, but basketball is a thought too far. There's not big enough space. It's too disorienting. I'm experienced with basketball in the People's Park in Berkeley. It's great, but we don't have enough space for it. So I think we shouldn't really direct people in that way. When we talk about other things we would like, potentially on some things, yes, maybe. But on a water feature, we want a water feature. We want these people who are doing it to give us a water feature. And we want, we want an active play space. So that potentially should just be removed, and we should say this is something that we want.
Okay, let's keep going.
Okay, now let's see, where am I?
I think you're at number 10.
Wait, no, we go
This
back.
is another potentially. You had several
restroom. I think restrooms are really important. How we do that, it's a limited space, I don't know. But the composting toilets and the sense of a full circle of the life system is important. And I think as a demonstration place, the Common should have composting toilets, and we should ask the people to explore that. There's an excellent book called Humanure, looking at all sorts of composting toilets arrangements, including for places like our Commons. Now, then this comes to the question of the public building that I thought we had left in the last draft that we agreed upon, but when the markings came out, Rita said, no, cross that off, and it should not be crossed off.
I'm sorry, Alan, but I'm just going to say a point of order. We have a commission member who's been speaking for 7 minutes now.
Well, we had a chair who's been speaking. I'm glad to stop and go through the rest of this later. We can talk about what I've already spoken so far, and then we can deal with the rest. I only got 8 more.
Alan, let's. I want to be conscious of trying to give you some opportunity to talk here, but I also want to be conscious of the time. What I don't want to get into is an explanation around every point. We will send out the document to everyone. I think you've already done so. We'll post it publicly.
I have not. I did it properly. I sent it to Christopher, and to you and to Alice to have it distributed, and I don't think it ever got distributed.
Well, you sent it this afternoon, so.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
But I'm not permitted to send it sooner.
Okay. All right, let's keep going.
Another question.
I want to give you another 5 minutes, and then we're gonna try and we're not taking a vote on this tonight.
Okay, we're not taking a vote. Just let me go through it. So, on the Civic Center building, I suggest to go back a little bit so I could examine location options, costs, and feasibility of a year-round Civic Center building or 4-season space arrangements allowing for such functions as. In those 8 functions that are listed there are things that often have been mentioned in terms of what we need as a civic center, a visitor center, gallery, cafe, so on. I don't need to reiterate them, but they should be part of what this professional group is helping us think. How can those functions be met in a building, or in the new Martin building, or in the Core Spaces building, or in the Noble House, or in a
Alan,
okay,
let's keep going. All right, we did talk about this building in particular extensively.
Okay, so now I'm keeping the functions and leaving the building as an option that creative people can figure out what to do with.
Okay.
Okay, there should be in there maximize geothermal power in particular, because the capacity of geothermal from the basement of that parking lot is very positive. But emphasize it that whoever the developers are, they should look at 2.0 priorities for 2030. And
I'd like to add another point of order.
okay,
These are available to anyone, including the public, to look at. We are not taking a vote tonight, and we have heard many of these things before in other meetings. What we have developed is not a finished document. We are not voting on it, and I think we should take a look at the first words of each one of these things and move on.
Yeah, Alan, I'm gonna say that we need to, like I said, I want to give you 2 more minutes, and so you
okay,
can get
well,
through the rest of these.
I will try and deal with this as quickly as I can. On this report from the Activation Committee, that branding this as the center of the city and omitting the commons is not acceptable at all. That's not the brand. And 2 further sections are, 1, to describe the form of organization that could be commonly pooled resources. What is a commons as an organizational form? And that was referenced further. It is not a amalgam. It is an organizational form that we need. And what is the kind of education of self-managed resources that we need? That is something also that should be referenced. I would add, besides letting people know that Library Green is a 501c3 and giving the correct name of the Ann Arbor Community Commons Initiating Committee, that we should have an invitation or an intention of education around materials as to what is the commons. Peter Linebaug's book on the Magna Carta Manifesto and several others, David Bollier's book, Thinking Like a Commoner, particularly Eleanor Ostrom's book on governance of the commons. It is referenced. I wish it would be and should be pointed out in the appendix, but we should reference that. So it would be another special attention. What is the education needed to engage the question of the commons? And so those 4, as well as the David Bollier, 3, as well as the David Bollier website, which is just amazing. And into
Ellen, you're at time. All right.
Okay. I think I got there. I'm done. I got my 18 in there. And we're not voting, but I hope people will recognize that the commons is really what this is about. If you think this is not what it's about, we will have a public discussion about that beyond this, because I cannot believe that people would vote to exclude the commons as a functional part of this.
Alan?
endeavor.
Yeah, we heard it.
Yep, we got you. All right.
Okay.
So I'd like to see if there are any comments related to any of these. We have offered up to everyone the opportunity to offer up changes to the original document. We're going to take into consideration those. And so I'd like to do the same with any areas here. And then I do want to explain from a process standpoint how I'd like to approach this to make sure we have something to take the city staff. So first things first, any ideas here that are in support or concerns around any of the ideas Alan has offered forth? It doesn't guarantee that any of them be incorporated, but certainly want to capture folks' thoughts. Rita, go ahead.
I agree with indicating the block being in transition. And I think exploring the potential for geothermal is a good idea, possibly exploring the space as a resilience hub.
Okay.
That's all.
Thanks, Rita. Jeff?
Yeah, I want to, although sometimes I have some reservations about the extent to which Alan proposes things. I do support his idea of a commons. I do think we do need to stay with that and define it some. so that we all understand what we're talking about. But I do think this is more than just a downtown park. I respect the concerns of people who are worried about the commons interfering with the possibility of getting a park put in place, and maybe that's a strategic or tactical issue. But I want to express my support for Alan's focus on the commons.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. Rita, is something else?
Mistake. Sorry.
No worries. Okay. And I will say, we did not, it was not without debate that we talked about the idea around commons as a term versus commoning. And there's a lot of concern about confusion regarding a movement versus a space. And so we did have a pretty lengthy discussion around this as well. And there was overwhelming support that we did not want to create that confusion for the designers. Erica, and then or Councilmember Briggs, and then Councilmember Cornell.
I appreciate the perspective that the committee took on this. I think that was the appropriate approach. We're putting an RFP out for a design process, and we need to make this simple.
Thank you. Councilmember Cornell.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to echo or build on what Erica said. Some of this feels really overly prescriptive, and the RFP calls for a lot of community engagement, and I would just caution this group to not presume to understand what the community actually wants, and to put so much of this. I liked the fact that the RFP was gave really solid guardrails within which to work, and this just feels really myopic, and it makes assumptions around what the public might want for this space, and I'm not comfortable with that. So I just want to go on record as that.
Jen, do you mean these amendments, or do you mean what we presented earlier?
No. I think what you presented earlier was great. I am fine with proceeding with the RFP as it is. I think these amendments are just super overly prescriptive for where we are, and I think would stifle some of the responses we might get back from firms who would be willing to do this work. And I do think that it also sort of makes assumptions on what the public at large in our community engagement process would look like by baking all this in at this stage.
Yeah. I will indicate I agree with you, Councilmember Cornell. I think that the idea behind having a sort of broad, forward-thinking, open-ended approach is going to yield us with a lot of results, whereas if we try and narrow, we will cut out opportunity. So, Frank?
I just want to echo my support for Jen's comments and Erica, and I think the group and individually, we've discussed this with Alan, and I think what we all want is to create something that has the potential to be these other things, but not to over-prescribe these other things at this stage. If we don't succeed in getting the physical space as a public asset, then all these other wonderful ideas, will not be possible. So, a building, the commons, etc. I think those things are only possible if we are successful in getting this scope completed, getting the design study started, and see where this takes us. Let's not overprescribe it at the front end. Thank
you, Frank. And I see Jen and Jeff both have their hands up. I think that's carryover from last time. Frank, you've got yours up too. So unless there are any other comments, what I'd like to propose then, we have, this meeting is publicly available. We've recorded all of these comments. I'm going to review them afterwards, and I'd like to have the committee grant me the ability to take into consideration any comments that seem to have majority support, reject any comments that don't seem to have majority support, and make some amendments. I will send it back out for public posting. And then I'd like to have a conversation with the staff at the Parks Department utilizing that document. Is that something the committee is willing to grant me the ability to do going forward?
I didn't quite get it. What do you mean by majority support? I didn't quite understand what was proposed.
Yeah, so I'd like to take a look and see if there are any amendments to the document that seem to have folks who are interested in seeing those amendments go forth. Any that, for instance, some of the wording changes or technical changes, and then if there are more feature-based changes that seem to have opposition, we would reject those or add them in if there was support. And then I'd like to take that document and talk with Parks. We're not approving it tonight. We wouldn't be approving it then, but I'd like to talk with the Parks staff to gather their input, as Councilmember Briggs indicated early in the meeting this evening, that was a important and procedurally correct next step. So I really would just like to take a look at our comments and review, and then if there are changes, make them as what seemed to be the direction of the committee.
Well, if the direction of the committee is to exclude the comments, no, I do not approve.
Alan, real quick, I didn't actually call on you yet. Steve still has the floor. So Steve, I was just answering your question. Is that?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I guess my larger comment is I just want a chance to read more fully those comments. I thought I followed along with Alan's discussion, but I haven't had a chance to read them. I agree with the comment. I kind of like the flavor of a lot of the sentiment there. I don't know that I agree with all of the granular changes. And I'm also inclined towards what Councilmember Cornell mentioned in terms of not over prescribing with regard to the space, but kind of giving the hints to the bidders as to what they ought to consider. So I want to take, I think I'm in favor of what you described, Adam. I think you're taking a lot of the responsibility on yourself to try to sort of distill the discussion and make some modifications to get to a document that we can then float to the parks team, park staff with a straight face. I guess, like I said, I want a chance to read the comments and read the whole proposal kind of with this discussion tonight in mind. The other comment I'll make is that, are we 100% sure that it's just parks, or is there DDA? Is there anybody else that needs to be sort of ground floor with this document? So with that, I'm sorry for talking so long, but those are my thoughts on that.
No, that's okay. And I think what I'd like to suggest, based on what you just said, Steve, is certainly want to give folks, because everyone is seeing these Alan's amendments tonight. I'd like to see, Chris, if we could pass these amendments out, and also, when I give maybe through the weekend, we'll take a look, see if there's any reflections, Steve and others, as you take a look at them, and see if you'd like to send any comments back. You can do that, and I can send another document out, and we could post those both publicly so that we don't have any transparency issues. Chris, is that something you can do?
Yes. So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna create that into a PDF and upload it to the agenda, making it so that everyone can see it.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for that. So we'll do that. We'll do two things. We'll upload Alan's amendments to the agenda, and Chris already has those, so he can take care of that. And then we'll give you through the weekend, on Monday, through Monday, to take a look and see if there are any feedback around those. And I will make some adjustments at that point in time, send out a revised document, let us know. Let's put it this way. Yes, we don't want to be in violation of any OMA, so we won't communicate on the document. But if there are, hopefully that will be a reflection of where, where we're at based on the amendment. So, and Steve, to your second point regarding staff, one thing that we did talk about with Heather previously was, and she had worked out within the city departmental interface, was that the Parks Department would be the ones leading it. So I do want to give them their due at coordinating however they choose within the city structure.
You had described, or you were going to write out exactly what you thought was going to be the process when we get review of what Parks is working on, how Library Green gets involved in the review of this, that whole process after what we send to them. How do we hear what comes back, and what is the process of actually reviewing the responses to the RFP? So that in the discussion with Parks, that should produce some sort of working plan. Is that in the works somehow in your conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fairly open-ended right now, considering the last conversation we had with Parks on this was a little while ago, and the agreement at that point in time was we would take a look and take a first stab at the scope, and then come back. And so, what that process is going to look like, I think we'll have to come back and ask them. But we have not gotten to that point. So I will keep you posted, Alan.
Thank you.
Alice?
Once again, too much has been said between the time I thought. But I think the one point that Steve made and others have made, Erica, is that there is a time for the granularity, and that would be in the time when we have a successful bidder for the RFP, and they are developing the process for engagement and for the design of a space that might meet the resulting agreement about what kind of things we want. This is way too granular. And so I just have to say also that there is some wording which I would not want to accept at this stage. And the word commons is part of it, in that before the proposal A was considered and passed, the name of the RFI response that I authored and Alan signed, the last change that I wanted to make was not to have commons on that, in the title of that. And that title is now owned by the city. And so they would perhaps need to agree to the branding of that. Because the proposal that I wrote went to the city, it is city property, and therefore there are some intellectual property questions in that. But mainly all of this could come out easily in the public engagement, and none of this is in stone. We probably will give up a lot of control over this once it goes to Parks, but we will not give up all contributions. So that's all I want to say now. I'm pretty tired.
All right, thanks, Alice. All right, Ellen, did you have anything last comments to add? I think we've got a direction on this at this point.
Yeah, well, since nothing is written in stone, I don't have any stones to throw. But
Okay.
yeah, well, Alice, what you just said, where we began was the A2C2 Ann Arbor Community Commons.
Alan, I don't want to talk about it right now.
Let's, the point of this was to talk about the RFP. So let's wrap it up then. I think we've got good direction. So Chris is going to post Alan's comments or Alan's amendments here so they're publicly accessible. Take a look, and then I'm going to make some, changes to the document based on where I think folks are at in our public discussion this evening. And then we will try and start talking with Parks as quick as possible here. And that will be a topic for the next agenda of this group, in addition to some working group agendas in the interim. So I'll go ahead and pull this down. And I think we can move on to, Ellen, you already indicated, actually, you already spoke to the other documents as reference points. Those are in the activation working group area. There were two, some interesting things. I just scanned them. Alan, if you have 1 minute, if you'd like to summarize either of those two documents or just pass them as points of reference, that's fine as well.
Yeah, no, just pass them on. Reimagining the Commons, beautiful, innovative projects in places all over the country. And the first one I sent about parks. There's a lot of good ideas, and I think we immerse ourselves in those. It's good for us to see what other places are doing, whatever they call it. So I didn't have any further. I did want to, though, in the activation part, if we can move for a moment to our next working group. The Earth Day is coming up. Jeff Crockett gave a very nice description. We got some great music. We'll have some excellent speakers. We're going to have exhibits of organizations, what they're doing for the Earth and the climate, and good stuff. I would hope that the initiating committee is sponsoring this. I would hope that, as is our function in some way, that the Council of the Commons would say this is a good idea and encourage the city council and city staff to all come and make this really a community event concerned with the earth we share and the environment, and participate in other way people can. So I would be very happy if we would just say yes to the Earth Day and be able to pass that on. I hope that the city newsletter could put a notice of it in. Often the parks people put in notices of what's going on in the parks around town, but they sort of leave out the center of the city, Central Park, even if it's not so administered. And this is opportunity sort of activation to get the city agencies more engaged. So I think I sent to Chris the current leaflets on the Earth Day that he could post up. But anyhow, it should be a good program. I hope everybody will come, and I hope we could say a yes to it that could be passed on to the city council and city staff and make this center of the city. This will be the 10th time we've done this in the Commons Library lot area since 2014.
Thanks, Alan. All right. So with that, we're going to wrap up the activation. There are a couple of linked items in that agenda item. The next item is any next agenda items. We've already got one, which is just to have the results of any of these RFP discussions that come back from park staff. Are there any other items that we'd like to touch on? I know I have been working to reach out to a couple of other communities who we have worked with or spoken with about coming to speak as some guest speakers, similar to how we did with David Cohen at the City of Detroit. But there are certainly other opportunities for that too. Are there any other ideas here that we'd like to have included in that?
Well, actually, the question was raised about what is the organizational form of this gathering of resources. And so I would like that on the agenda of what can be the organizational form. I did talk with Lawrence, the county deedsman, Kassenbaum, about how a commons would actually be formally organized. And I think that's the question of how these very disparate properties can be brought together in a unified administration or management.
Okay.
Could that be on the agenda?
All right, Alan, thanks. Steve, and then Councilmember Briggs.
This is my second to last meeting. So the next meeting is my last meeting. And that's because my term on the Parks Advisory Commission is over. My last meeting there is on May 16th. So we think we have identified the lucky winner from Parks Advisory Commission who will take the role of liaison. Rachel Skyless has actually been observing the meeting here this evening in the lobby, if you will. And she didn't get scared off yet, even though, despite us showing what we really are like as a committee. And when I first got on this thing, because the opportunity came up within Parks for this liaison, I volunteered right away because I thought this would be the most Ann Arbor thing ever. And having been born and raised here, I felt like that would be something I did not want to miss. And this has not disappointed. I thought it's been a very good discussion. And honestly, it's a difficult discussion because it's a topic that doesn't have a lot of easy answers. It's a complicated site. And so I think it's really been worthy of our time and energy to get it from where it was to where it is now. And so I'm happy to have been part of that journey. But like I say, I'm out of here. Like whether I like it or not, my role is expiring. So I would put that on the topics for next meeting, just because I'll be stepping out and the new one will probably be stepping in, and so to sort of make that transition part of the discussion.
So what you're asking for is a celebratory evening to celebrate Steve. Is that specifically the agenda item?
Second that motion. Yeah.
Very good. We can arrange that. All right, Councilmember Briggs, you have the last word here, and then we're going to move into public comment and adjourning.
Very good. Thanks for all your service here, Steve. I did want to let folks know, I don't know if we need to have this as the next agenda item, but we did receive a memo back from city administration regarding the food truck memo responsive back to the recommendations that city council had made and the commission had made earlier. So just wanted to let folks know that that's will be distributed probably directly out to the commission at some point. I think attached to the next city council agenda. And I would actually like to suggest I don't think that Alan's recommendation for the discussion around management of the space or the commons is necessarily appropriate. We have I think that'll come after the.
I didn't understand what you were just saying.
The last piece?
Yeah.
Alan had made a recommendation for a next agenda item around management of the spaces of commons. I think that'll management of the space will come out later.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very good. All right. Thank you very much, Councilmember Briggs, for all of that. We're going to move into public comment. Chris, do we have any other members of the public who got their hands raised?
Yes, Robert Black has just raised his hand. Robert, you'll be given 3 minutes. You are allowed to speak.
Thank you, Chris. Can you hear me okay?
It's echoing.
I think I got a strange connection.
Yeah, Robert, I think you've got your, you probably have your mic on and your computer on with the volume. That is typically what causes that issue.
Is it still echoing?
It is. And try it one more time here.
If I speak more quietly, does that help? No.
No, unfortunately, it's definitely, I've done this before, so I've experienced this problem you are. And it is certainly, you've got two devices on.
No, I just have one, just one. So
why don't you call back in? We'll get to any other speakers, and once you hop off, and we'll get you at the last word.
Thank you.
Okay. Chris, any other members of the public?
Okay, Daniel Adams, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak.
Thanks, Dan.
Good evening, Dan Adams again, 1016 Daniel Street. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge the effort that went into the RFP document, and especially the contributions made by volunteers, city staff, even folks that I don't agree with on the merits of the project. I think those efforts deserve to be acknowledged and respected. I say that because I think I need to speak plainly about what I've heard tonight about the stakes of the RFP that you're discussing. I think they're significant. The cost of treading water here are going to continue to incur grave damage on the city and city residents who might have benefited from the investments that could have been made absent the intervention of this project. So my email to the council from 2 months ago requested an update on the project's financial status, including a summary of the Library Green Conservancy's fundraising progress, fundraising plan, and financial support for the RFP. I think this is a reasonable ask, given the stakes of this project and the public commitments that are going to be made to fund it. I didn't hear that tonight, and I'm asking again that the next meeting include that update. There are Library Green officers on this council. We ought to be able to hear that. The public deserves that. With respect to the RFP, this body had 2 years to deliberate and get this document ready to issue. You have a working group tasked to that objective, and you should have been ready to issue the document the moment you had the resources to do it. But it's clear from tonight's dialogue that you're not. Much of this meeting has been spent reviewing and even debating branding choices in a draft document that hasn't even been socialized with city park staff. Meanwhile, the project itself is years behind schedule, has no funding source, and the city is continuing to burn millions a year in revenue that could be plowed into various city funding priorities, including housing, support for the homeless, all kinds of things that we need money for and don't have. I don't understand the lack of urgency, especially from the Library Green members on this council who were champing at the bit to plan and build this project in 2018. I wish these folks had the same level of energy that they had plowed into defeating the Core Spaces project, into creating this park and issuing this RFP. The RFP's community values section reflects, I think, an acknowledgement, the first one to my knowledge, of the harsh financial realities that this project faces, that there is no money in the parks budget, nor political will within the community to pass a large supporting millage to build this project. I think those are true statements. The omission of Library Green's fundraising capacity is also, I think, a tacit acknowledgement that they are not on any timescale able to build this project. I think if these statements are true, then you are, as an advisory board of the city council, obligated to inform the city council and the public of these facts objectively, clearly, and plainly, without false optimism, meaningless euphemisms like activation, and pleasant sounding bromides. Let's be clear about what we're talking about. The statement that we are taking a deliberate activation focused approach within the center of the city, that is nonsense. And I mean that literally. I don't know what it means, and I'm not meant to know what it means. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Any other members of the public, Chris?
Okay, we're going to try Robert Black one more time. Hopefully the echo has been fixed.
Robert?
Robert?
Chris, I think I fixed it.
Okay.
You got it. Much better.
Bravo. Kudos to Councilmember Borgsdorf. Thank you for your service, and I trust that the next liaison that comes in will continue the kind of respectful dialogue that you create, and I really appreciate that. Just also to say, remember, this is called the Council of the Commons. And so you refer to Commons twice, a couple times, two times in Ann Arbor's history, there's a downtown Commons. You could explore this. There's already sentiment from this Councilmember Haver and Councilmember Henney that the Commons is an important future tradition. If you look at one of the other RFI responses, which I helped put together and champion, it talks about learning from the past and then the present and the future. There is a trend already to the future that has to do with this idea. And I think you could include some language that at least sets the stage to move into this discussion. Okay. The second thing is there was a bullet deleted from section 3 deliverables on anticipated results that Heather Saferth, Miss Saferth, had actually included in here from the early language that was stricken from here. And it said includes a year-round civic center building if feasible. And what I heard Chair Zemke say, broad thinking, open-ended approach to not cut out opportunities. Don't cut out the opportunity of the possibility of a building. If you look at page 23 of the task force report, it says, we have heard enthusiasm for a civic center commons building that would host activities such as commons decision-making space, cafe, community theater, auditorium, celebration room, art gallery and studio, visitor center, on and on. We do not know, do not preclude that it is only the city and you have no resources. That's an old paradigm that no longer applies here. I know there are many people who have money in this town that would support this if you have the right vision. And also, Councilmember Hammerschmidt, I really appreciate your planning professional approach here. And same thing with council member Alice Ralph. During this session in section 2, site detail of the block, I provided an example of a professionally rendered block on Google Earth Pro that does exactly what Councilmember Hammerschmidt was saying. And I think if you add that graphic correctly, this version shows the bike paths on it. The one that's in there is unprofessional. It's not ortho-corrected. I would not use it as a professional thing.
30 seconds.
Groups. And then lastly, I just want to reiterate the fact that activation is occurring on this thing, and to the extent that the Council of the Commons is championing the activation, Earth Day, for example, you've heard some good things about that. Join in and see. I wrote a song last year that was sung there, and it will be sung again this year. Find a spirit in this place that you can see in activating the Commons. And then also join with Mr. Crockett and the group to forward the mural.
Your time is up.
And let's get some activation going that'll bring the spirit of the community together here. So thank you. Bravo on your good work tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Any other members of the public, Chris?
Oh. Okay. No, there's no more.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you for your facilitation of our meeting this evening, your first one. Welcome to Ann Arbor in the most Ann Arbor way, to quote Steve Borgsdorf tonight. So I think we've got a good tactic. If Chris will post for the public Alan's amendments, and then I will start on Monday making any edits to the document based on our recording this evening. So thank you very much to everyone who participated this evening. Thank you for the time. We're pretty close to time. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Any opposed? Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.